She went to a job interview, and the millionaire across the desk was her one-night stand. Before we explore all the details of this incredible story, tell us where you're following us from and the time. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing, and let's embark on this journey together. She knew she shouldn't be here, but somehow she needed this more than air. Sierra Malone adjusted her black dress one more time, glancing at her reflection in the restroom mirror of Velour, downtown's most sophisticated bar. Her natural curls framed her face perfectly, and her dark eyes held a mixture of exhaustion and determination that only someone who'd worked 2 jobs while earning a business management degree would understand. "Girl, you look incredible," her friend Kayla whispered, touching up her lipstick beside her. "When's the last time you went out?" Actually went out. Sierra couldn't remember. Between morning shifts at the diner and evening classes, her social life had become a distant memory. Tomorrow was supposed to change everything. Her interview at Royce Logistics, the kind of company she'd only dreamed of working for. "Tomorrow's the big day," Sierra murmured, more to herself than to Kayla. "I can't mess this up." "That's exactly why you need tonight," Kayla insisted, pulling her toward the door. "One night to breathe. One night to remember you're human." The bar hummed with conversation and soft jazz. Sierra found herself at a small table, nursing a glass of wine she couldn't really afford, watching the city lights twinkle through floor-to-ceiling windows. She felt oddly peaceful, despite the nervous energy coursing through her veins. "Mind if I join you?" The voice was warm, confident, without being pushy. Sierra looked up to find a man standing beside her table, tall with dark hair slightly tousled, wearing a simple button-down that somehow looked expensive. His eyes were the kind of deep brown that made you forget what you were thinking about. Sierra hesitated. She didn't do this, didn't talk to strangers in bars, but something about his genuine smile made her nod. "Sure." He sat down, and she noticed how he seemed completely at ease, as if he belonged everywhere and nowhere at once. "I'm not usually the type to approach someone, but you looked like you were carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders." Sierra laughed softly, surprised by his perception. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who knows the feeling." He signaled the waitress for another drink. "Big day tomorrow?" "The biggest." She found herself opening up in a way that felt foreign, yet natural. "Job interview. The kind that could change everything, you know?" "I do know." His eyes held understanding that seemed deeper than casual conversation. "What field?" "Business management. Logistics, specifically." Sierra took a sip of wine, feeling herself relax for the first time in months. "I just finished my degree. Took me longer than most people, but you did it." His voice held genuine admiration. "That takes real strength." They talked for hours, about dreams deferred and pursued, about the courage it takes to start over, about the small moments that make life beautiful. He had a way of listening that made Sierra feel seen, not just heard, but truly seen. She learned he worked in business too, but he was vague about details. She didn't press. Tonight wasn't about resumes or LinkedIn profiles. It was about connection, raw and honest. "I should go," Sierra finally said, glancing at her phone. It was past midnight, and her interview was at 9 a.m. "Of course." He stood with her, helping her with her jacket in a gesture that felt both old-fashioned and perfectly natural. "Sierra?" She realized she'd told him her name, but he'd never shared his. Somehow it didn't matter. Outside the bar, the cool night air sobered her slightly, but not enough to change her mind when he asked, "Would you like to continue this conversation somewhere more private?" Sierra had never been impulsive, never been the type to go home with a stranger, but standing there looking into his eyes, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Alive. "Yes," she whispered. His apartment was elegant but not ostentatious, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of the city. They talked on his couch until talking became touching, until touching became something deeper, more meaningful than either had expected. Later, as Sierra lay in his arms, she traced patterns on his chest and wondered if she was dreaming. He kissed the top of her head, and she could feel his heartbeat gradually slowing. "I should leave early," she murmured against his skin, "before you wake up. Make this easier for both of us." His arms tightened around her slightly. "If that's what you want." But neither of them wanted easy. They both knew this was different. This connection that had sparked between 2 strangers was something neither had experienced before. As dawn approached, Sierra dressed quietly, watching him sleep. His face was peaceful, younger somehow. She memorized the moment, knowing she'd probably never see him again. At the door she paused, her hand on the handle. Part of her wanted to wake him, to exchange numbers, to see if this magic could survive daylight. But tomorrow was too important to complicate with fairy tales. She slipped out into the morning, carrying with her the memory of the most perfect night of her life and the strangest feeling that everything was about to change. 3 hours later, Sierra stood in front of her bathroom mirror, applying the last touches of makeup for the most important interview of her life. She had no idea that the man whose arms had held her just hours before was already sitting in the conference room, reviewing her resume with growing recognition and disbelief. Have you ever had such an intense connection with someone that it changed your life in a single night? What if you found out the next day that this person has the power to make or break your professional dreams? What would you do? Follow your heart or protect your future? The coffee in Sierra's hand had gone cold 20 minutes ago, but she couldn't bring herself to drink it anyway. She sat in the pristine waiting area of Royce Logistics, her navy blazer pressed to perfection, her resume printed on expensive paper tucked neatly in her leather portfolio. Everything about her screamed professional competence, but inside her heart hammered against her ribs like a caged bird. The receptionist, a polished woman named Beverly, had offered her coffee twice and made small talk about the weather. Sierra nodded and smiled at appropriate moments, but her mind kept drifting to strong arms around her waist and whispered conversations in the dark. Focus, Sierra. This is your shot. She'd worked too hard to let one perfect night, no matter how earth-shattering, derail the most important morning of her professional life. Her diploma sat framed on her tiny apartment wall, a testament to years of sacrificing sleep, social life, and sanity. 2 jobs, night classes, student loans that would follow her to the grave. All of it had led to this moment. Ms. Malone, Beverly's voice cut through her thoughts. They're ready for you in conference room A. Sierra's legs felt unsteady as she stood, smoothing down her skirt one final time. The hallway seemed endless, lined with abstract art and motivational quotes about excellence and innovation. She'd researched everything about Royce Logistics, their expansion into sustainable shipping, their reputation for treating employees well, their mysterious CEO who rarely gave interviews but had transformed the company into an industry leader. She paused outside the conference room door, took a deep breath and knocked. "Come in." Sierra pushed open the door and stepped inside, her practiced smile firmly in place. "Good morning. I'm Sierra Malone, here for the words died in her throat. Sitting at the head of the polished conference table, wearing an impeccably tailored charcoal suit and tie, was him, the man whose bed she'd left just 6 hours ago, the man whose hands had traced every curve of her body with reverent attention, the man whose name she'd never learned. His dark eyes met hers across the room, and for one crystalline moment, the professional facade cracked. She saw recognition flash across his features, surprise, something that might have been panic, and underneath it all, something that looked dangerously like longing, but it lasted only a heartbeat. "Ms. Malone," he said, his voice smooth and completely controlled. "Please have a seat. I'm Damian Royce. Damian Royce, CEO, billionaire, the man who could make or break her career with a single word." Sierra's legs carried her to the chair across from him, though she couldn't feel them moving. She was grateful for the large table between them, grateful that her hands were steady as she placed her portfolio in front of her. "Thank you for this opportunity, Mr. Royce," she managed, her voice surprisingly professional despite the chaos in her chest. 2 other executives flanked him, Linda Hartwell from HR and James Morrison from Operations. They smiled warmly, completely oblivious to the electric tension crackling between their CEO and the candidate. "Your resume is quite impressive," Linda began, flipping through Sierra's application. "Working full-time while completing your degree shows remarkable dedication." "Thank you," Sierra replied, forcing herself to focus on Linda instead of the man whose gaze she could feel burning into her skin. "I believe in earning what you want, not just wishing for it." "Admirable philosophy," James added. "What draws you specifically to logistics?" Sierra launched into her prepared answer about supply chain efficiency and sustainable business practices, grateful to have something concrete to focus on. She'd rehearsed this presentation dozens of times, and muscle memory took over. But throughout her responses, she was hyper-aware of Damian's presence. He asked thoughtful questions about process optimization and team management, his tone completely professional. If she hadn't felt his breath on her neck just hours ago, she might have believed he was simply another executive evaluating a candidate. "Ms. Malone," Damien's voice cut through her explanation of inventory forecasting models. What would you say is your greatest strength in a leadership role? The question was standard, but the way he asked it, the slight emphasis on strength, made her pulse quicken. She thought of his whispered words from the night before. You're stronger than you know. Authenticity, she answered without hesitation. I believe people respond to genuine leadership. Someone who doesn't pretend to have all the answers, but isn't afraid to find them. Something flickered in his eyes. Approval, perhaps, or recognition of the woman he'd held in his arms. The interview continued for another 20 minutes. Sierra answered every question with growing confidence, her natural intelligence and hard-earned knowledge shining through. Despite the surreal circumstances, she could feel herself impressing the panel. Well, Linda said finally, closing her folder, I think we have everything we need. We'll be in touch within 48 hours. Sierra stood, shaking hands with Linda and James. When she reached Damien, their fingers touched for just a moment longer than professional courtesy required. His hand was warm, familiar, and she fought the urge to hold on. Thank you for your time, she said, meeting his eyes directly for the first time since she'd entered the room. The pleasure was mine, Miss Malone, he replied, and she caught the subtle emphasis on the word pleasure. As she walked toward the door, she heard him speak again, his voice carefully neutral. Miss Malone. She turned back, her hand on the door handle. Good luck, he said simply, but his eyes said so much more. Sierra nodded and left the room, her legs somehow carrying her down the hall, past Beverly's desk into the elevator and out into the bright morning sun. Only when she reached her car did she allow herself to collapse against the driver's seat, her carefully maintained composure finally cracking. She just had the interview of her dreams with the man from her most perfect night. And neither of them had any idea that this was only the beginning of a collision that would change everything they thought they knew about love, power, and the courage to risk it all. Sierra stared at her phone for the third time in 10 minutes, willing it to ring. 2 days had passed since the interview, 48 hours of replaying every moment, every word, every stolen glance across that conference table. She'd barely slept, barely eaten, surviving on coffee and the kind of nervous energy that makes your hands shake and your thoughts race in endless circles. Her tiny studio apartment felt smaller than usual. The morning sun streamed through her single window, illuminating the stack of bills on her kitchen counter. Rent due in 5 days, student loan payment overdue, credit card balances that made her stomach churn. The diner had cut her hours again, and her savings account showed a balance that wouldn't cover groceries. She needed this job, not wanted, needed, but every time she closed her eyes, she saw Damien Royce's face in that conference room, the shock in his dark eyes, the way his jaw had tightened when she'd said her name, the careful professionalism that couldn't quite hide the recognition burning beneath. What was he thinking? Did he remember the way she'd laughed at his stories? The way she'd traced patterns on his chest in the early morning light? Her phone buzzed. Text message. Kayla. Girl? Any word yet? I'm dying over here. Sierra typed back quickly. Nothing yet. Trying not to lose my mind. Kayla. They'd be crazy not to hire you. You're brilliant, gorgeous, and you rocked that interview. Trust me. If only Kayla knew the whole truth. Sierra had told her friend about getting the interview, but she'd kept the night at Velour and its shocking aftermath to herself. Some secrets were too complicated to share, even with your best friend. The phone rang. Sierra's heart stopped. Unknown number, but with a local area code. Her hands trembled as she answered. Hello? Ms. Malone? This is Linda Hartwell from Royce Logistics. Sierra's mouth went dry. Yes, hello, Ms. Hartwell. I'm calling with good news. We'd like to offer you the position of Administrative Operations Manager. The salary is $65,000 annually, plus benefits and performance bonuses. The room spun. Sierra gripped the phone tighter, sure she'd misheard. Excuse me? You got the job, Sierra. Linda laughed warmly. We were all very impressed with your interview. Your experience and education are exactly what we're looking for, and frankly, your passion for the industry came through loud and clear. Passion for the industry. If only she knew where that passion had really been focused during the interview. Thank you, Sierra managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Thank you so much. When would you need me to start? Monday, if that works for you. I know it's short notice, but we're eager to get you on board. HR will email you all the paperwork today. Monday, 4 days away. 4 days to mentally prepare for working in the same building as the man she couldn't stop thinking about. Monday is perfect, Sierra said. surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "Wonderful. Oh, and Sierra, Mr. Royce specifically asked me to tell you he's looking forward to working with you." The words hit her like a physical blow. Mr. Royce specifically asked. That's very kind of him," she managed. After Linda hung up, Sierra sat in stunned silence for a long moment. Then slowly she began to smile, then laugh. Then she was on her feet, dancing around her tiny apartment like she'd won the lottery. She'd done it. Despite everything, despite the surreal circumstances, despite the distraction of seeing him again, she'd impressed them with her qualifications alone. She'd earned this. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Congratulations, you deserved this opportunity. D." Sierra stared at the message until her eyes blurred. He had her number. He was thinking about her, and somehow knowing that made the victory feel both more real and more complicated. She typed and deleted a dozen responses before settling on, "Thank you." His reply came immediately. "See you Monday." 2 words that carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken questions. Sierra walked to her closet and pulled out her limited selection of professional clothes. She'd need to buy at least 1 more blazer, maybe 2. For the first time in years, she could afford to think about upgrading her wardrobe. But as she held up a black pencil skirt, all she could think about was Damien's hands sliding it off her body in the soft light of his bedroom. "This is insane," she thought. "I'm about to work for a man who's seen me naked, a man who knows exactly what I sound like when I—" She shook her head violently, hanging the skirt back up. She was a professional. He was a professional. They were adults who'd shared one night together. One perfect, impossible night that was now firmly in the past. She could do this. She would do this. Her phone rang again. This time it was Kayla. "Tell me everything," her friend squealed, before Sierra could even say hello. "I got it," Sierra said, and saying the words out loud made it feel real for the first time. "I actually got it, Kay. I knew it. I knew it. Oh my God, we have to celebrate. Drinks tonight, my treat. We're going to paint the town red." Sierra laughed, feeling lighter than she had in days. "Actually, let's stay in, order pizza, watch terrible movies. I want to savor this." "Whatever you want, superstar. You just changed your whole life." As Sierra hung up, she realized Kayla was right. Her life had just changed completely. New job, new salary, new future stretching out ahead of her like an open road. The only question was whether Damien Royce would be a detour or a destination. Monday morning was coming fast, and with it the first day of a professional relationship that had already broken every rule in the book. The elevator climbed to the 15th floor, and Sierra's stomach dropped with every passing number. She'd arrived at Royce Logistics 30 minutes early, sitting in her car in the parking garage, practicing breathing exercises and reminding herself of all the reasons she deserved to be here. Her new blazer, navy blue, purchased with the last $20 in her checking account, felt like armor against the uncertainty ahead. The elevator dinged softly, and the doors opened to reveal a bustling office floor. Employees moved with purpose between cubicles and offices, coffee cups in hand, phones pressed to ears. It looked like success felt, organized, dynamic, alive with possibility. "Sierra Malone?" A woman approached with a warm smile and an outstretched hand. She was probably in her 40s, with kind eyes and the sort of confident posture that spoke of years in management. "I'm Patricia Vance, your direct supervisor. Welcome to the team." Sierra shook her hand, grateful for the genuine warmth. "Thank you, Ms. Vance. I'm excited to get started. Please call me Patty. We're pretty informal here, despite what the fancy building might suggest." Patty gestured for Sierra to follow her. "Let me show you to your office." Office, not cubicle. Sierra tried to keep the surprise off her face as Patty led her down a hallway lined with glass-walled spaces. "Here we are," Patty said, stopping at a corner office with windows overlooking the city. "It's not huge, but it's yours. Computer's already set up. Passwords are in that envelope on your desk." Sierra stepped inside, running her fingers along the smooth desk surface. She'd never had an office before, had never even imagined she'd have one this nice. Through the glass wall, she could see other employees going about their morning routines, and through the exterior windows, the city stretched out below her. "The executive floor is right above us," Patty continued, her tone carefully neutral. "Mr. Royce likes to stay accessible to department heads, so don't be surprised if you see him around more than you might expect." Sierra's pulse quickened, but she kept her expression professional. "Good to know. Coffee in the break room is actually decent, unlike most office coffee. Lunch is at 12:30 if you want to join the group. We usually walk to that little sandwich place on 5th Street. Patty paused at the door. Any questions so far? Just one, Sierra said, settling into her desk chair. What's my first priority? Patty grinned. I like you already. There's a stack of logistics reports on your desk that need analysis. The Morrison account is our biggest client, and they're considering expanding their contract. We need to show them we can handle the increased volume. After Patty left, Sierra dove into the work with relief. Numbers and spreadsheets were familiar territory, safe ground where her competence could shine without complications. She lost herself in shipping routes and efficiency calculations, grateful for something concrete to focus on. 2 hours later, she was deep in a complex forecasting model when someone knocked on her glass door. She looked up to find Damien Royce standing in her doorway. He wore a different suit today, charcoal grey that made his dark eyes look almost black, but the effect on her pulse was exactly the same. Professional, controlled, and underneath it all, unmistakably him. Ms. Malone, he said, stepping into her office and closing the door behind him. How's your first morning going? Very well, thank you, Mr. Royce. She stood, smoothing down her skirt, hyper-aware of the way his eyes followed the movement. I'm just reviewing the Morrison account projections. Excellent. He moved closer to her desk, and she caught the faint scent of his cologne, the same one that had lingered on her skin that morning after. I wanted to personally welcome you to the team. That's very kind of you. They stood there for a moment, the air between them charged with everything they couldn't say. Through the glass wall, Sierra could see other employees going about their business, completely unaware of the tension crackling in her office. Sierra, he said quietly, and hearing her name in his voice sent shivers down her spine. Mr. Royce, she interrupted, her voice firmer than she felt. I want you to know that what happened before, it won't affect my work here. I'm completely professional. Something flickered across his face. Disappointment, maybe, or admiration for her directness. Of course, he said, his tone matching hers. I wouldn't expect anything less. But his eyes told a different story. They lingered on her lips for just a second too long, and she remembered the taste of whiskey and possibility on his mouth. The Morrison projections, she said, desperate to break the spell. I think there are some inefficiencies in their current routing that we could address. It might actually save them money while increasing their volume capacity. Damien's eyebrows rose, and she saw genuine interest replace the personal tension. Show me? Sierra turned her laptop screen toward him, pulling up the spreadsheet she'd been working on. As she explained her analysis, pointing to specific data points, he leaned closer to see the screen better. His shoulder brushed hers. His breath was warm against her cheek, and suddenly Sierra couldn't remember what she'd been saying about shipping lanes. This is impressive work, he said, his voice low and warm. You've identified patterns that our previous analyst missed completely. Thank you, she managed, acutely aware that he hadn't moved away. Sierra. Her name was barely a whisper, and when she turned to look at him, his face was inches from hers. For one heart-stopping moment, she thought he might kiss her. Right there in her glass-walled office, with half the company able to see them. Instead, he stepped back abruptly, his professional mask sliding back into place. Excellent work, Ms. Malone, he said, louder now, his voice carrying the authority of a CEO addressing an employee. Please have your full analysis on my desk by Thursday. Of course, Mr. Royce. He walked to the door, paused with his hand on the handle, and looked back at her one more time. Welcome to Royce Logistics, he said simply. After he left, Sierra sank into her chair, her heart racing. Through her window, she could see him walking back toward the elevators, his posture straight and confident. This was going to be harder than she'd thought, but what Sierra didn't know was that Damien was having the exact same realization and that their attempts to maintain professional distance were about to become much more complicated. 3 weeks into her new job, Sierra had become a master of strategic avoidance. She knew Damien's schedule by heart, not because she'd asked, but because she'd learned to read the subtle signs. When his assistant Margaret ordered lunch for one instead of scheduling a business meal, he'd be in his office all afternoon. When the executive elevator showed unusual activity around 10 a.m., he was likely heading to an off-site meeting. When the conference room on the 16th floor was booked for executive review, she made sure to be anywhere else in the building. It was exhausting. You're working too hard, Patty observed, appearing in Sierra's doorway with 2 cups of coffee. It's almost 7 p.m. on a Friday. Normal people have lives, you know. Sierra looked up from her computer screen, blinking away the strain of staring at spreadsheets for the past 10 hours. The office floor had emptied hours ago, leaving only the soft hum of air conditioning and the distant sound of the cleaning crew. Just finishing up the Morrison presentation, Sierra said, accepting the coffee gratefully. I want it to be perfect for Monday's meeting. The meeting you've somehow managed to avoid attending for 3 weeks. Patty raised an eyebrow, settling into the chair across from Sierra's desk. It's impressive, actually. I didn't think it was possible to be this valuable to executive decisions while never actually being in the same room as the executives. Sierra's cheeks burned. I've been busy with analysis work, field research, data collection. Uh-huh. Patty sipped her coffee, studying Sierra with the kind of perceptive look that made her squirm. Want to tell me what's really going on? Nothing's going on. I'm just... Sierra. Patty's voice was gentle but firm. I've been doing this for 15 years. I know when someone's running from something. The question is whether you're running from the job or from someone in the job. Sierra's hands stilled on her keyboard. Through her office window, she could see the city lights beginning to twinkle as dusk settled over downtown. Most of the building was dark now, but she could see light still blazing from the executive floor above. Was he still here too, working late thinking about Morrison projections and quarterly reports, or was he thinking about her? There was a complication, Sierra said finally. Before I started here, something personal that could affect my professional relationships. Patty nodded slowly. And you're handling it by pretending it doesn't exist? I'm handling it by focusing on my work and proving I deserve to be here. Honey, Patty said, her voice kind but knowing, you've already proven that. Your Morrison analysis saved the company $200,000 in the first month. Your efficiency recommendations have streamlined 3 different departments. Damian Royce himself told the board that hiring you was the best decision we'd made all year. Sierra's breath caught. He said that? In yesterday's executive meeting, which coincidentally you managed to miss again due to that sudden urgent need to inventory the warehouse. Patty's smile was understanding. Whatever this complication is, it's not affecting your work quality, but it is affecting you, and that's what I'm worried about. Before Sierra could respond, the soft ding of the elevator echoed across the empty floor. Both women looked up to see Damian Royce step out, his tie loosened, his usually perfect hair slightly mussed from running his fingers through it. He stopped when he saw the light in Sierra's office, and even from across the floor, she could see the moment he realized she was there. Well, Patty murmured, standing and gathering her things with knowing efficiency, I should get home to my husband. You two have a good evening. Patty, wait! But her supervisor was already gone, leaving Sierra alone as Damian's footsteps approached across the empty office floor. He appeared in her doorway, and Sierra's heart did that familiar skip that 3 weeks of avoidance hadn't been able to cure. Working late again, he observed, his voice carefully neutral. The Morrison presentation, Sierra said, gesturing to her computer screen. I wanted to make sure the projections were accurate for Monday's meeting. The meeting you've requested to attend by video conference from the satellite office, he said, and there was something almost amused in his tone. Interesting choice, considering the satellite office is a 20-minute drive each way. Sierra's face burned. I thought it would be more efficient. Sierra. He stepped into her office, closing the door behind him with deliberate care. We need to talk. Her pulse quickened. About the Morrison account? About the fact that you've been avoiding me for 3 weeks? His voice was quiet, but there was an edge to it that made her look up sharply. About the fact that you've somehow managed to miss every executive meeting, every department briefing, and every company event since you started here. I haven't been avoiding. You took the stairs to avoid sharing an elevator with me yesterday, he interrupted. You walk the long way around the building to avoid passing my office. You eat lunch at your desk instead of joining the team in the break room when you know I might be there. Sierra stared at him, her carefully constructed excuses crumbling under the weight of his observation. This has to stop, he said, moving closer to her desk. Whatever we need to discuss about before, we need to discuss it, because this dance we're doing isn't sustainable. There's nothing to discuss, Sierra said, but her voice came out smaller than she intended. What happened before has nothing to do with work, doesn't it? His eyes held hers, and she saw frustration there, and something that looked like longing. Because I can't concentrate in meetings knowing you're deliberately staying away. I can't make decisions about projects you're involved in without wondering if you're avoiding them because of me. Sierra stood slowly, her hands shaking slightly. What do you want me to say, Damian? The use of his first name hung in the air between them like a confession. I want you to stop running, he said simply. I want you to attend Monday's meeting. I want you to do your job without calculating the statistical probability of crossing paths with me. And then what? The words came out more vulnerable than she'd intended. We pretend that night never happened? We pretend we don't know what each other sounds like in the dark? His jaw tightened, and she saw his control slip just slightly. If that's what it takes. I don't know if I can do that, she whispered. Then we figure out another way, he said, his voice rough with an emotion he was trying to hide. But this avoidance, this pretending, it's not working for either of us. The confession hung between them like a bridge. Neither was quite ready to cross, but both knew they couldn't avoid forever. The Monday morning meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. sharp, and Sierra arrived at 8:30, determined to prove she could be professional. She'd spent the weekend replaying Friday night's conversation, analyzing every word, every pause, every moment when Damien's carefully maintained control had slipped. We figure out another way. The words had echoed in her mind as she'd picked out her outfit, practiced her presentation, and reminded herself that she was Sierra Malone, competent, qualified, and capable of handling any situation, even this one. The executive conference room buzzed with pre-meeting energy. Department heads shuffled through papers, assistants poured coffee, and laptops hummed to life around the polished mahogany table. Sierra took a seat halfway down the table, close enough to present her findings but far enough from the head of the table to maintain some emotional distance. She was reviewing her notes when Damien walked in. He looked impeccable as always. Navy suit, crisp white shirt, confidence radiating from every step. But Sierra had learned to read the subtle signs, the slight tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes swept the room before landing on her, the almost imperceptible pause when their gazes met. "Good morning, everyone," he said, taking his seat at the head of the table. "Let's begin with the Morrison account analysis. Sierra?" Her name on his lips sent that familiar jolt through her system, but she stood smoothly, moving to the presentation screen with her laptop in hand. "Thank you, Mr. Royce." She connected her computer and pulled up the first slide. "Over the past month, I've conducted a comprehensive analysis of Morrison Industries' shipping patterns and identified several opportunities for optimization." As she clicked through her presentation, Sierra felt her confidence return. This was what she was good at. Numbers, logic, solutions that made sense on paper and in practice. She explained routing inefficiencies, cost-saving measures, and potential expansion scenarios with the kind of precision that had earned her this job in the first place. "Questions?" she asked, finishing her final slide. James Morrison, not the client, but the head of operations who shared the name, raised his hand. "These projections assume Morrison Industries will increase their volume by 30%. What if they can't meet those numbers?" "Excellent question," Sierra replied, clicking to a backup slide she'd prepared. "I've modeled 3 scenarios: conservative growth at 15%, moderate at 30%, and aggressive at 45%. In all cases, the efficiency improvements we're proposing will result in cost savings that justify the initial investment." Around the table she saw impressed nods, scribbled notes, and the kind of engaged attention that meant she'd done her job well. "Outstanding work," said Linda Hartwell from HR. "How quickly could we implement Phase 1? "With Morrison Industries' approval, we could begin the routing changes within 2 weeks, Sierra answered. "And the timeline for full implementation?" This question came from Damien, his voice professionally neutral, but his eyes holding an intensity that made her pulse quicken. 6 months for complete optimization, with measurable improvements visible within the first quarter, Sierra replied, meeting his gaze directly for the first time since that night 3 weeks ago. Something passed between them. Approval, recognition, and underneath it all, that undeniable current of attraction that professional settings couldn't quite neutralize. The meeting continued for another hour, with Sierra fielding questions and suggestions with growing confidence. When it finally ended, she was packing up her laptop when Damien's voice stopped her. "Sierra, could you stay behind for a moment? I have some follow-up questions about the implementation timeline." The room emptied quickly, leaving them alone with the morning sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and the lingering energy of a successful presentation. "That was exceptional work," Damien said once the door closed. "You've essentially redesigned their entire logistics framework in a month." "Thank you," Sierra replied, surprised by how much his professional approval meant to her. "I wanted to make sure I was bringing real value to the company." "You are." He moved closer, and she could see exhaustion in his eyes that hadn't been visible during the meeting. "Sierra, about Friday night." "You were right," she interrupted. "The avoidance wasn't working, for either of us. So what do we do now?" His voice was quieter, more vulnerable than she'd heard it since that first night. Sierra looked at him, really looked at him. This man who'd held her like she was precious, who'd listened to her dreams and fears in the dark, who'd given her a job based on merit, despite the complicated history between them. "We figure out how to work together," she said finally, "professionally, without letting what happened before affect our judgment or our careers." "And personally?" The question hung in the air between them. Sierra's heart hammered against her ribs. "There can't be a personally. You know that. You're my boss, Damien. You're a billionaire CEO, and I'm an employee who's still paying off student loans. The power dynamic alone makes this impossible." "What if it wasn't impossible?" he asked, stepping closer. "What if we found a way to make it work?" "How?" Sierra's voice was barely a whisper. "How do we make this work without compromising everything we've both worked for?" Damien was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes searching her face. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I know I can't stop thinking about you. I know that watching you present in there, seeing how brilliant you are, how passionate about this work, it made me remember why that night was different." "Damien," Sierra's resolve wavered as he reached up to touch her cheek. "I know all the reasons this is complicated," he said softly. "I know all the ways this could go wrong, but I also know that I've never met anyone like you, Sierra, and I'm tired of pretending I have." The confession hung between them like a bridge, dangerous and tempting and impossible to ignore. "What are you saying?" she whispered. "I'm saying that maybe we stop fighting this and start figuring out how to make it work," he replied. Carefully, quietly, but honestly. Sierra closed her eyes, feeling the last of her carefully constructed walls crumbling. When she opened them again, Damien was watching her with an expression of hope and fear that mirrored her own. "This is crazy," she said. "Completely crazy," he agreed. "We'll have to be so careful. No one can know, not until we figure out what this is and how to handle it." "I know." Sierra took a shaky breath. "Okay. Let's be crazy together," she said, and for the first time in 3 weeks she saw Damien smile, really smile, the way he had that first night when the world had been full of possibility. But neither of them realized that in a building full of observant colleagues and office gossip, keeping secrets would be harder than either of them imagined. 2 weeks of stolen moments had taught Sierra that falling in love while maintaining professional composure was an art form she was still learning. It started with text messages sent from different floors of the same building. "Your analysis in today's briefing was brilliant." Dee would appear on her phone while she sat 3 seats away from him in the conference room, fighting to keep her expression neutral while her heart raced. She'd respond hours later, "Thank you for the Morrison contract approval. It means everything." And they both knew she wasn't just talking about work. The coffee shop on the corner of 5th and Main became their accidental meeting place. Sierra would grab her usual latte at 7:15 a.m., and somehow Damien would appear in line behind her, ordering his black coffee and pretending it was coincidence when they walked the same direction back to the office building. "Sleep well?" he'd ask, as they waited for the light to change, his voice carefully casual for any passers-by who might overhear. "Better than I have in weeks," she'd reply, and they'd share a look that said everything they couldn't voice on a public street corner. At work, they maintained perfect professionalism. Sierra attended every meeting, contributed to every discussion, and excelled at every project with a focus that impressed even Patty, who'd started making comments about Sierra's renewed energy and professional glow. But it was the small things that threatened to give them away. The way Damien's eyes would linger on her face for just a second too long when she presented quarterly projections. The way Sierra's breath would catch when he leaned over her shoulder to review spreadsheets, his cologne mixing with the scent of possibility. The way they'd both reach for the same document during board meetings, their fingers brushing in ways that felt electric and dangerous. "You're playing with fire," Kayla observed over lunch at their usual spot downtown. "I can see it written all over your face." Sierra nearly choked on her sandwich. "What are you talking about? Girl, please. You've been glowing like a woman in love for 2 weeks. Your skin is clearer, you're humming in elevators, and you bought new underwear. Don't think I didn't notice the Victoria's Secret bag in your car." Heat flooded Sierra's cheeks. "I got a raise. I'm allowed to buy nice things." "Uh-huh." Kayla sipped her iced tea with knowing eyes. "So who is he? Who is who?" "The man who's got you floating on cloud 9 and texting during movies. The one who makes you check your phone every 5 minutes and smile at messages like you're reading love poetry." Sierra's phone buzzed as if on cue. She glanced down to see, "Dinner tonight? That little Italian place on Elm Street? 8 p.m.? Her pulse quickened as she typed back, "Won't that be risky?" His response came immediately, "Worth it." "Oh my God," Kayla breathed, reading Sierra's expression like an open book. It's someone from work, isn't it? That's why you're being so secretive. Okay, please tell me it's not that married guy from accounting, or worse, that creepy supervisor from the warehouse who keeps asking you out. It's not anyone inappropriate, Sierra said quickly, then realized how that sounded. So there is someone. Kayla leaned forward conspiratorially. Spill now. Sierra glanced around the crowded restaurant, making sure no one from Royce Logistics was within earshot. I can't talk about it here. It's complicated. Complicated how? Like he's divorced with kids complicated, or like he's your boss complicated? The way Sierra's face went pale answered the question. Oh, honey, Kayla said softly. Please tell me you're not falling for someone who could fire you. It's not like that, Sierra protested weakly. We have history, from before I worked there, and it's not about power or anything inappropriate. We're being careful. Careful how? Careful like secret dates and hidden relationships careful, because that kind of careful has a way of exploding spectacularly. Sierra's phone buzzed again. If you're not comfortable with dinner, we could take a drive instead. Talk somewhere private. She found herself smiling despite Kayla's warnings. Dinner sounds perfect. See you at 8. You're in deep, aren't you? Kayla observed, watching Sierra's face transform as she read and responded to the messages. Maybe, Sierra admitted quietly. Probably, definitely. Just be careful, okay? Really careful. I've seen what happens when office relationships go wrong, and you've worked too hard to get where you are. That evening, Sierra changed clothes 3 times before settling on a simple black dress that could pass for either casual or slightly dressy, depending on how you looked at it. She arrived at Giancarlo's 5 minutes late, partly from nervousness and partly from strategic timing. She didn't want to seem too eager. Damien was already seated in a corner booth, having clearly requested the most private table in the restaurant. He stood when he saw her, and the smile that spread across his face was worth every risk they were taking. You look beautiful, he said quietly, as she slid into the booth across from him. You clean up pretty well yourself, she replied, taking in his casual button-down and dark jeans. Without the armor of his business suits, he looked younger, more approachable, more like the man she'd met that first night. They ordered wine and pasta, falling into the easy conversation that had characterized their relationship from the beginning. He asked about her childhood in North Carolina, her decision to move to the city, her dreams beyond the corporate world. She learned about his pressure to take over the family business, his complicated relationship with wealth, his genuine passion for logistics and efficiency. I never expected to care this much about shipping routes, Sierra admitted, twirling linguine around her fork. But there's something beautiful about finding the perfect solution, you know? Making something complex feel simple. That's exactly how I feel about you, Damien said quietly. Sierra looked up sharply, meeting his eyes across the candlelit table. Everything about this situation should be complex, he continued. The professional complications, the power dynamics, the potential consequences. But when I'm with you, it feels simple, right? Damien, Sierra's voice caught on his name. I know it's risky, he said, reaching across the table to take her hand. I know all the ways this could go wrong, but I also know that I haven't felt this way about anyone in, maybe ever. Sierra looked down at their joined hands, his fingers warm and familiar against hers. What happens when people find out? Because they will, eventually. Office buildings are gossip mills, and we're not as subtle as we think we are. Then we deal with it, he said simply. Together. What if the board objects? What if it affects your company? Then I'll make sure it doesn't affect your career, he replied firmly. Whatever happens, Sierra, I won't let this hurt you professionally. She looked up at him, seeing determination and vulnerability in equal measure. You can't promise that. I can promise that I'll try, he said, and I can promise that you're worth the risk. But as they sat in that intimate restaurant, neither of them noticed the familiar face at the bar. Someone who worked 2 floors down from Sierra and had just gotten a very interesting piece of information to share at tomorrow's coffee break. The whispers started on Tuesday morning, and by lunch Sierra knew her carefully constructed world was about to collapse. She first noticed it in the elevator. 2 women from marketing who stopped talking abruptly when she stepped in, their eyes following her with barely concealed interest. Then came the lingering stares in the break room, the conversations that died when she approached, the knowing looks exchanged between colleagues who thought they were being subtle. Sierra tried to convince herself it was paranoia, the natural anxiety of someone living a double life. But when she walked past a cluster of administrative assistants and heard the words corner booth at Giancarlo's, her blood turned to ice. Someone had seen them. Her phone buzzed with a text from Damien. "Need to see you. My office. Now." The executive elevator felt like a death march. Sierra's reflection in the polished steel doors showed a woman trying desperately to maintain composure while her world shifted beneath her feet. She dressed carefully that morning. Navy blazer, conservative blouse, professional demeanor. But now she wondered if people were looking at her clothes and seeing something else entirely. Margaret, Damien's assistant, barely looked up when Sierra approached. "Go right in. He's expecting you." Damien was standing at his floor-to-ceiling windows when she entered, his back rigid with tension. The door clicked shut behind her, and he turned around, his face grave. "We have a problem," he said without preamble. "I know." Sierra's voice was steadier than she felt. The looks, the whispers. "Someone saw us last night. Not just someone." Damien moved to his desk, pulling up an email on his computer screen. Rebecca Thorne from Human Resources. She was at Giancarlo's with her book club. She sent this to Linda Hartwell an hour ago. Sierra's legs felt weak as she read over his shoulder. "Linda, I thought you should be aware of something I witnessed last night." Sierra Malone was having what appeared to be a romantic dinner with Mr. Royce at Giancarlo's restaurant. "I don't want to cause trouble, but given the company's policies regarding employee relationships and the potential for conflict of interest, I felt obligated to report what I saw. Please let me know how you'd like me to proceed." Rebecca. "Oh, God." Sierra sank into the chair across from his desk. "This is it, isn't it? This is how it all falls apart." Damien sat across from her, his expression carefully controlled. "Linda wants to see both of us in her office at 3 p.m., separately first, then together. What are we going to say?" Sierra's mind raced through possibilities, each one worse than the last. "We can't lie outright. If they investigate, they'll find the coffee shop meetings, the text messages. We tell them the truth," Damien said quietly. "Which truth? That we slept together before I worked here and have been secretly dating for 2 weeks. That sounds so much better." "Sierra," his voice was gentle but firm, "we tell them that we developed feelings for each other, that we've been trying to handle it professionally and that we understand the complications. And then I get fired for violating company policy, and you get a slap on the wrist because you're the CEO," Sierra said bitterly. "That's not going to happen." "You can't guarantee that, Damien. You know you can't." Sierra stood and began pacing, her carefully maintained composure finally cracking. "I worked so hard to get here. I gave up everything, social life, sleep, financial security, to earn this position. And now it's all going to disappear because I couldn't keep my personal life separate from my professional life." "Hey," Damien stood and caught her hands, stopping her frantic movement. "Look at me." Reluctantly, Sierra met his eyes. "This isn't your fault," he said firmly. "If anyone's career should suffer consequences, it should be mine. I'm the one with the power in this situation. I'm the one who should have known better." "But you're also the one who can't be fired," Sierra pointed out, pulling her hands free. "You own 40% of this company, Damien. The board isn't going to force you out over a relationship. But me? I'm replaceable. You're not replaceable to me." The words hung in the air between them, vulnerable and desperate. "That's not enough," Sierra whispered. "What we feel for each other. It's not enough to protect my career if this goes wrong." Before Damien could respond, his office door opened. Linda Hartwell stood in the doorway, her expression professional but strained. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said, "but I think we need to move up our meeting. The situation has become more complex." "What do you mean?" Damien asked. Linda stepped into the office, closing the door behind her. "Rebecca's email has been forwarded to 3 board members. There's also been talk about launching a formal investigation into potential conflicts of interest, given Sierra's rapid promotion and the Morrison account's success." Sierra felt the blood drain from her face. "They think I slept my way into my job?" "I think some people are looking for explanations that fit their preconceptions," Linda said diplomatically. "Which is why we need to address this immediately and transparently." "What are our options?" Damien's voice was tight with controlled anger. "Limited," Linda admitted. "Sierra, you could request a transfer to another department, which would remove the direct reporting relationship, or one of you could consider taking a leave of absence while we sort through the policy implications." "Or?" Sierra asked, though she dreaded the answer. "Or we could recommend that you resign, with excellent references and a generous severance package, to avoid further complications for both you and the company." The words hit Sierra like a physical blow. She'd known this was a possibility, but hearing it stated so matter-of-factly made it real in a way that stole her breath. "No," Damien said sharply. "Sierra Malone is one of the most talented analysts this company has ever hired. Her work on the Morrison account alone has saved us hundreds of thousands of dollars. We're not losing her because of office gossip." "Damien," Linda said gently, "I understand your position, but we have to consider what's best for everyone involved, including Sierra herself." Sierra looked between them, watching her career and her relationship discussed like items on a business agenda. She thought about her tiny apartment, her student loans, the years of sacrifice that had led to this moment. "I need some time to think," she said quietly. "Of course," Linda replied, "but I'm afraid we'll need a decision by end of business today. The board is meeting tomorrow morning, and they'll want answers." As Linda left, Sierra and Damien stood in silence, the weight of impossible choices settling between them. "What do we do?" Sierra asked finally. Damien looked at her with an expression that broke her heart, love and frustration and helplessness all mixed together. "I don't know," he admitted, "but whatever we decide it together." But Sierra was beginning to realize that some decisions couldn't be made together, and that sometimes loving someone meant making the hardest choice of all. Sierra sat in her car in the parking garage at 4:47 p.m., 13 minutes before she had to give Linda Hartwell an answer that would determine the rest of her life. Her resignation letter lay on the passenger seat, typed and printed on company letterhead, her signature a careful script at the bottom, 3 paragraphs that summarized her month at Royce Logistics and thanked them for the opportunity while citing personal reasons for her departure. It was the smart choice, the safe choice, the choice that protected everyone. Her phone had been buzzing all afternoon. Missed calls from Kayla, text messages from Patty asking if she was okay, and a stream of messages from Damien that had grown increasingly desperate. "Don't do this. We can find another way. Please, Sierra, don't run. I'm willing to step down temporarily if that's what it takes." That last message had made her cry in the bathroom stall on the 14th floor, ugly sobs that she'd muffled with her hands pressed against her mouth. He was willing to step down, for her. A billionaire CEO ready to walk away from his company because she was worth it to him. But that was exactly why she couldn't let him. Sierra picked up her phone and scrolled to Damien's contact. Instead of calling, she typed, "Meet me on the roof, 5 minutes." The roof access was technically restricted, but Sierra had discovered weeks ago that the door was usually unlocked during business hours for maintenance crews. She pushed through the heavy metal door and stepped into the late afternoon air, the city spreading out below her like a promise she might never get to keep. Damien appeared less than 3 minutes later, slightly out of breath from taking the stairs 2 at a time. "Sierra, thank God. I thought you'd already—" He stopped when he saw her face. "You're really going to do it, aren't you?" "It's the right choice," she said, though the words felt like glass in her throat. "For who?" His voice was rough with emotion. "For them? For the company? Because it's sure as hell not right for us." "For you," Sierra said quietly. "It's right for you." Damien stared at her, and she saw the moment understanding hit him. "No, Sierra, no. You're not sacrificing your career for mine. Your career isn't just about you," Sierra said, moving to the ledge that overlooked downtown. "You employ 300 people, Damien. You have responsibilities, obligations, a legacy to maintain. I have student loans and a studio apartment. Don't," his voice was sharp with pain, "don't minimize what you are, what you've accomplished. You earned your position here, Sierra. You earned it with your intelligence and your hard work and your talent. And I'm about to lose it because I fell in love with my boss." The confession slipped out before she could stop it, hanging in the air between them like a bridge she couldn't cross back over. Damien went very still. "What did you say?" Sierra closed her eyes, feeling tears spill over her cheeks. "I said I fell in love with you, which is why I have to go. That's exactly why you have to stay." She turned to find him right behind her, his eyes dark with an intensity that made her knees weak. "I love you too, Sierra," he said, his voice breaking slightly on her name. "I love your laugh when you think no one's listening. I love the way you chew your lip when you're concentrating on spreadsheets. I love that you see solutions where other people see problems. I love that you're brave enough to start over, smart enough to succeed, and stubborn enough to walk away from something good because you think it's noble." "Damien, please don't make this harder." "I'm making it honest," he interrupted. "For the first time since that night at Velour, I'm being completely honest. I love you, and I'm not letting you disappear from my life because other people have small minds and smaller hearts." "What are you saying?" Damien took her hands in his, and Sierra could feel them trembling slightly. "I'm saying that if you resign, I resign too. You can't do that. I can do anything I want. It's one of the few perks of being disgustingly wealthy." His attempt at humor fell flat, and his expression grew serious again. "Sierra, I've spent my entire life making decisions based on what other people expected of me, taking over the company because it was tradition, dating women who looked good at charity galas, building a life that looked perfect from the outside and felt empty on the inside. That's not—" "Let me finish." His grip on her hands tightened. "You changed that. That night we met, you saw me. Not my last name or my bank account or my title, just me. And these past few weeks working with you, watching you transform this company with your ideas, it's been the first time I've felt like the person I am matched the person I wanted to be." Sierra's tears were falling freely now. "What are you asking me to do? I'm asking you to trust me. Trust us." Damien released her hands to frame her face with his palms. "Stay at Royce Logistics. Let me handle the board, the gossip, the complications. Let me prove that what we have is worth fighting for. And if it doesn't work, if they force you out anyway, then we'll figure it out together," he said simply. "I'd rather build something new with you than maintain something empty without you." Sierra searched his face, seeing determination and vulnerability and love so fierce it took her breath away. "The board meeting is tomorrow morning," she whispered. "I know. Linda needs an answer in 8 minutes. I know. This could destroy everything you've worked for." "Sierra," his voice was gentle but firm, "you are everything I've been working toward, even when I didn't know it. Everything else is just details." She looked at him, this man who'd been willing to step away from his empire for her, who saw her worth even when she doubted it herself, who loved her enough to fight the entire corporate world if necessary. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay? Okay, let's fight." Sierra stood on her tiptoes and kissed him, tasting salt from her tears and promise from his lips. "Let's see what happens when we stop running and start believing we deserve this." When they broke apart, Damien's smile was brilliant enough to rival the setting sun. "Together?" he asked. "Together," she confirmed. They walked back toward the stairwell hand in hand, Sierra's resignation letter forgotten in her car, their future uncertain but no longer empty. But as they prepared to face the corporate battle ahead, neither of them knew that tomorrow's board meeting would bring a revelation that would change not just their relationship, but the entire foundation of Royce Logistics itself. The boardroom at 8 a.m. felt like a courtroom, and Sierra was both the defendant and the key witness. She sat beside Damien at the polished mahogany table, her hands steady, despite the storm raging in her chest. Around them, 12 board members shuffled through documents and whispered among themselves with the kind of quiet intensity that preceded corporate executions. Charles Whitmore, the silver-haired chairman who'd known Damien since childhood, called the meeting to order with a grave expression that didn't bode well for anyone. "We're here to address the allegations regarding a personal relationship between CEO Damien Royce and employee Sierra Malone," he began, his voice carrying the weight of institutional disapproval. "This matter concerns potential conflicts of interest, violations of company policy, and questions about Ms. Malone's rapid advancement within the organization." Sierra felt every pair of eyes in the room land on her like physical weight. She'd dressed carefully that morning, her best suit, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back in a professional bun, but she wondered if they saw competence or scandal when they looked at her. "Before we begin," Damien said, his voice cutting through the tension, "I want to make something absolutely clear to this board." Charles raised an eyebrow. "Damien, perhaps we should hear from Ms. Malone first." "No." Damien stood, and Sierra felt the shift in power dynamics like electricity in the air. "You'll hear from me first because I'm the one who bears responsibility for this situation." He moved to the head of the table, every inch the commanding CEO Sierra had first seen across an interview desk. But now she knew the man underneath the authority, the one who made her coffee in the mornings and listened to her dreams in the dark. "Sierra Malone was hired based solely on her qualifications," Damien began, his voice clear and unwavering. "Her interview was conducted by a panel that included Linda Hartwell and James Morrison. Her references were impeccable, her test scores were the highest we've seen in 5 years, and her work since joining the company has exceeded every expectation." Board member Margaret Chen leaned forward. "But you had a prior relationship with Ms. Malone before her employment here, didn't you?" Sierra's breath caught, but Damien answered without hesitation. "I met Sierra Malone one night in a bar. We spent several hours talking, and yes, we spent the night together. Neither of us exchanged last names or contact information. When she walked into her interview the next morning, I was as surprised as she was. And you didn't recuse yourself from the hiring decision? This from Thomas Bradley, whose disapproval was written across his face. I should have, Damien admitted. But I also recognized that Sierra was exactly what this company needed, and my personal feelings, however complicated, shouldn't deprive Royce Logistics of exceptional talent. Your personal feelings, Charles repeated slowly. Are we to understand that you've been pursuing a romantic relationship with a subordinate employee? You're to understand, Damien said, his voice growing stronger, that I fell in love with a woman who challenged me intellectually, impressed me professionally, and made me want to be better than I was. The fact that she works for this company doesn't diminish her worth or her accomplishments. Sierra felt tears prick her eyes at his words, but she blinked them back. This wasn't the time for emotions. Ms. Malone, Charles addressed her directly. What's your perspective on this situation? Sierra stood slowly, feeling the weight of 12 skeptical gazes. Mr. Whitmore, members of the board, I understand why this situation appears problematic. A young woman recently hired, involved with the CEO. It fits a narrative that many people are comfortable believing. She paused, gathering her courage for what she needed to say next. But that narrative ignores who I am and what I've accomplished. I graduated summa cum laude while working 2 jobs. I've increased efficiency in 3 departments since I started here. My Morrison account analysis has saved this company over $400,000 in the past month alone. I didn't sleep my way into this position. I earned it. Nevertheless, Margaret Chen interjected, the appearance of impropriety is based on assumptions about my character and my abilities, Sierra interrupted, surprising herself with her firmness. I respect this company too much, and I respect myself too much to compromise either for personal gain. Then what do you propose we do about this relationship? Thomas Bradley asked. Sierra looked at Damien, seeing love and encouragement in his eyes, and made the decision that had been forming in her heart since yesterday. I propose that you judge us by our actions, not your assumptions, she said. Damien and I have maintained complete professionalism at work. Our personal relationship has never influenced business decisions or compromised company interests. If you need to create new policies to address workplace relationships, then create them. But don't punish competence because it comes with complications. The room fell silent. Sierra could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. Then Charles Whitmore did something unexpected. He smiled. Ms. Malone, he said, you've just demonstrated exactly why Damien hired you. That was either the most foolish or the most courageous thing I've ever heard in this boardroom. Hopefully both, Sierra replied, and several board members actually chuckled. Charles looked around the table, making eye contact with each member. All in favor of allowing Mr. Royce and Ms. Malone to continue their employment with the understanding that their relationship will be disclosed and monitored for any conflicts of interest. One by one, hands went up around the table, not unanimously. Thomas Bradley and one other member abstained, but enough to carry the vote. Motion carried, Charles announced, with the following conditions. All interactions between Mr. Royce and Ms. Malone regarding company business must be documented. Ms. Malone will report directly to the COO rather than the CEO to eliminate direct reporting relationships, and both parties will participate in quarterly reviews to ensure no conflicts of interest arise. Sierra felt her knees go weak with relief. She was still employed. They both were. There's one more thing, Damien said, and Sierra's heart stopped. What was he doing? I want to announce my engagement, he continued, and Sierra's world tilted sideways. Damien, she whispered, but he was already moving toward her. Sierra Malone, he said, dropping to one knee in front of the entire board of directors. You've already changed my life in every way that matters. Will you marry me? The room erupted in surprised murmurs, but Sierra could only see Damien's face, hopeful and terrified and completely sincere. Are you insane? She whispered. Completely, he replied with a grin. But I'm also in love with you, and I don't want to waste another day pretending that what we have is anything less than extraordinary. Sierra looked around the boardroom, at the shocked faces, the calculating expressions, the few genuine smiles, and realized that none of it mattered compared to the man kneeling in front of her. Yes, she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Yes, you absolutely crazy, wonderful man. As Damien slipped a ring onto her finger, where had he gotten a ring, and kissed her in front of the most powerful people in the company, Sierra realized that sometimes the most professional thing you can do is be completely, unapologetically human. The boardroom applauded, some enthusiastically, some politely, but they applauded. And Sierra Malone, soon to be Sierra Royce, knew that the best decisions in life were the ones that scared you and thrilled you in equal measure. 6 months later, the morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of their new apartment, casting golden light across the hardwood floors and the half-packed boxes that still dotted the living room. Sierra Royce, she was still getting used to the name, stood at the kitchen counter in one of Damien's oversized shirts, her wedding ring catching the light as she stirred honey into her coffee. 6 months ago, she'd been mixing instant coffee in a studio apartment, counting pennies, and dreaming of a future that seemed impossibly distant. "You're up early." Damien's voice was warm with sleep as his arms wrapped around her waist from behind. "Couldn't sleep," Sierra admitted, leaning back against his chest. "Big day today." Today was the official launch of the Morrison expansion, the project that had brought them together professionally and nearly torn them apart personally. But it was also something more, proof that love and ambition could coexist, that taking risks sometimes led to rewards beyond imagination. "Nervous?" Damien asked, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Excited," Sierra corrected. "There's a difference." Through their windows, the city was waking up. Early commuters heading to coffee shops, joggers making their way through downtown streets, the everyday rhythm of people chasing their dreams. Sierra thought about her younger self, the woman who'd walked into that bar 6 months ago carrying the weight of exhaustion and hope in equal measure. She'd had no idea that one conversation with a stranger would rewrite the entire trajectory of her life. "I have something for you," Damien said, releasing her to retrieve a small wrapped package from the counter. "It's not my birthday," Sierra protested, but she was already smiling as she accepted the gift. Inside was a simple silver necklace with a small compass pendant. "So you never lose your way," Damien explained as he fastened it around her neck. "Though I have a feeling you've always known exactly where you were going." Sierra touched the pendant, feeling its weight against her skin. "I knew where I wanted to go, I just didn't know how to get there." "And now?" She turned in his arms, studying his face. The face she woke up to every morning, the face that had looked at her across a boardroom table with professional respect and personal desire. The face that had been filled with love and terror when he'd proposed in front of 12 corporate executives. "Now I know that the best destinations are the ones you discover along the way," she said. "The ones you never planned for, but can't imagine living without." Her phone buzzed with a text from Kayla. "Saw the Morrison announcement in the business section. My girl is taking over the world. Also, dinner Sunday? I want to hear all about married life." Sierra showed Damien the message, and he laughed. "Should I be worried that your best friend still interrogates me about my intentions?" "Always," Sierra replied with a grin. It's one of her best qualities. Another text came in, this one from Patty. "Congratulations on the Morrison launch. The whole team is proud of you. Coffee later to celebrate?" Then one from Linda Hartwell. "Outstanding work on the expansion project. The board is thrilled with the results." And finally, surprisingly, one from Charles Whitmore. "Well done, Ms. Royce. Your father-in-law would be proud. The whole world is rooting for us now," Sierra observed, scrolling through the messages. "Not the whole world," Damien said. "Thomas Bradley still gives me disapproving looks in board meetings. He'll come around, my charm is irresistible." It certainly worked on me. They stood together in their sun-filled kitchen, coffee growing cold in their hands, the city humming with possibility outside their windows. In a few hours, they'd go to the office. Sierra to her expanded role as Director of Strategic Operations, Damien to his CEO responsibilities, and they'd spend the day being professional colleagues who happened to share a last name and a mortgage. But for now, they were just Sierra and Damien, two people who'd found each other in the most unexpected way and chosen to build something beautiful from the complications. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't met that night?" Sierra asked. Damien considered this, tracing patterns on her hand with his thumb. "I think we would have found each other eventually. Maybe not at Velour, maybe not during your interview, but somehow some people are just meant to collide." "Is that your professional opinion, Mr. Royce?" "That's my personal guarantee, Mrs. Royce." Sierra laughed, the sound echoing through their new home, their new life, their new beginning, that had started with a single conversation and a leap of faith. Outside, the city continued its morning routine, full of people making choices that would change their lives in ways they couldn't yet imagine. Somewhere in a coffee shop or an office building or a bar after work, other strangers were about to meet and discover that sometimes the most important appointments are the ones you never scheduled. But Sierra wasn't thinking about other people's love stories anymore. She was too busy living her own. Ready for another day of being disgustingly successful and inappropriately in love? Damien asked, stealing a sip of her coffee. Always, Sierra replied, and meant it with every fiber of her being. As they prepared for another day of building their empire together, professional and personal, practical and passionate, Sierra touched the compass pendant at her throat and smiled. She'd found her true north, and it looked exactly like forever. The end. Sierra and Damien proved that sometimes the greatest risks lead to the most beautiful rewards. If you had the chance to rewrite your own love story, would you be brave enough to choose the person who challenges everything you thought you knew about yourself? What would you risk for a love that transforms not just your heart, but your entire life? Your participation in the channel is very important, so please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.